On the bench today I have a Hewlett-Packard 3467A Logging Multimeter, and I've had this instrument for a few years now. I was using it doing some evaluation of drift on some precision op amps for a project we had on, and it was logging away the circuit parameters that I was interested in, and then all of a sudden it just stopped working, and I thought, oh no, it's probably capacitors in the power supply or something. Well, I've only just got around to have a look at this. The first thing I did was to check all the rail voltages, and they're all fine, no problem. And there's a test procedure that you can do where, with this test button selected and then one of the channels selected, you get various test functions occurring. With channel 1 you get a display test occurring. Channel 2 allows you to test the printer. Channel 3 tests the memory and the front panel push buttons, and channel 4 selects tests for functions and range tests. Well, the display test worked, the printer test didn't work. We were getting some funny things happening with the push button test, and it also was showing ER for error on the display here, and that started to concern me, because if there's a memory error, that means that maybe we have corrupt ROMs on the processor board, and this uses a 6802 microprocessor, so it shouldn't be too hard to troubleshoot, hopefully. But if the ROM, any of the ROMs are corrupted, then that could be it, because I don't think, unless, you know, short of getting another unit that's got good ROMs in it, I've got probably little hope of getting this running again easily. A quick inspection of the processor board revealed some pretty badly tarnished pins on this ROM chip here, and as a first step I removed the chip and used fiberglass pencil to clean away all of the tarnish off of the pins, and I've deoxided the socket and then replaced the chip, and we're starting to make some progress. Now when we do the memory and front panel test, it doesn't come up with ER for error anymore on the display. Instead it comes up with FP for the front panel test, and it generally works except for one of the push buttons seems to give a wrong enunciator, so we still may have some issues with that particular ROM, and I haven't tested or checked the pins on these other two ROMs or on the processor yet, but that's the next step. The reason being that these are all gold plated pins, whereas this was just standard tin and had tarnished pretty severely. It was black basically right all the way along the pins. So the next step will be to clean everything else and just see whether we get any further improvement on the function of the unit. Well, now some of the test functions start working properly. You can see the display, all of the display LEDs and digits are showing, and we can change over to the front panel test, and this allows us to actually display annunciators based on the button we press. So you see the degrees C, degrees F, millivolts, volts, ohms, k ohms. We can see temperature. Oh no, wrong. The hold function displays the weight annunciator. Step shows three of the channel annunciators. We put the Y function on, and that gives us that. Then we can go off. We'll display 1, 2, 3 channel annunciators. Delta and 2, delta percent and 1 and 2, star and 3, divide and 1 and 3, dB and 2 and 3. And the paper advance will show 2 and 4, and main print will show 1 and 4. So and microvolt ohm 0 gives us 3 and 4. So all of those are indicating what is correct as per the manual. But if we change over to print, the print function is not working. And similarly, there's the channel 4 selection for testing should actually print as well, and that's not doing anything. So obviously there's an issue with the printer, and I did have a small board in there that had come loose and may have shorted internally, so that could be the issue. But then we've got to troubleshoot that board. After checking the processor board in the HP3467A logging multimeter, I found that there was no problem with the processor after I'd cleaned the tarnished pins on one of the ROM chips. So that's all good. Previously you would have noticed on the signature analyzer a value of HP6, and that was the last probing of the 5-volt signal for this A5 board, which is both the printer and display driver board, and that's actually different to the signature SUSP for 5 volts on the main processor board. So the manual always says to check the 5-volt signal for the particular board that you're checking as a baseline for when you're checking the signatures of signals on the boards. And if you don't get that as a correct signature to start with, then usually the other signatures are going to be not valid. We have now established that the A2 processor board is working, and with other tests such as the front panel display and whatever, we know that the A3 board, which provides a 1 Hz timing signal, and we also know that the display section of the A5/6 board, if you like, works without having to do signature analysis on those two boards. The I/O board here mainly is for connection into the analog section, and at the moment we're not concerned with that. The main thing appears to be the printer not functioning. The first signature that we've actually checked is, as I've said, the 5-volt signature, and then The manual lists a set of signatures. It starts off with a key signature which must work, and then all of the other signatures on the board can be checked for troubleshooting which part of the circuit is likely to be the cause of the fault. In the 3467A service manual, the beginning of each section of the schematic, there is a setup section that indicates how the instrument should be set up for the signature analysis. And in this case, if I just zoom out a bit, you'll see right up the front here, there is, if I go a bit further, we've got test push buttons and the input selections all out. Then next we've got switch 2 and switch 1 on the A3 board set to down as referenced from the top of the board, and here we have the signature analysis pod connections for board A2, the processor board. Then down here, and I'll just zoom in a bit, we see the AHP6 reference signature for 5 volts, and it says that if setup is satisfactory, that will be correct, and then you can proceed to the signature checking, and we check the key signatures and or voltages. And here the first signature to check is U4 pin 1, and it's 0CUU, and that's on the print signal. So if we now have a look at that, and looking at pin 1 of U4, we've got some pulsing happening, and if I just zoom or pan up and across, and you can see that the signature display is unstable, and it's basically all over the place, and it should be 0CUU if it was working correctly. So that's an obvious fault, and we can now start tracing back from that point to see what the cause is there. In the service manual, the key signature listed here is for node is U4 pin 1, and the signature is supposed to be 0CUU, and this is the print control line, and it was giving me an unstable reading, and I backtracked it to a 74 LS138 on board A4 and replaced that, went down the rabbit hole, you know, in checking that, and found that the inputs, and I replaced that because the input signals from board A2 were the only signals going into that chip, and so I thought, right, we'll just replace that. Well, it didn't fix the problem, and I should have actually turned the page, because over here, and I'll just move the camera over, we have listed in bold the key signature, and it's on pin 15, not pin 1. So there's a trap for young players that I got caught in. I should have checked all of the signatures first. Once I checked pin 15, we got the right signature. So now I'll continue on and check all these other signatures. After checking all the signatures related to the printer, only one was different to what is in the manual, and that was U8 pin 13, which was reading PP45 instead of 830H, and this is data 5 data bit coming in from the bus. This difference I don't expect to be major if there is a fault on the printer itself, and so the next step will be to actually pull the printer assembly out and have a look at that and see what we find. As you can see here, I've removed the printer assembly from the front panel, and One of the things that was a bit strange was some of the time I could hear the motor running, some of the time I couldn't, and some of the time the sound of the motor running was a bit louder than other times. So I thought I'd better have a look at what's going on here. So I removed the printer assembly, and I started to remove the wiring from the motor drive and pulled off the black connection. That was fine. Started to pull off the red connection, and the pin stake that was in the circuit board actually came with the pin that's on the socket section that's on the lead wire. So obviously there's a solder joint failure there, and I fixed that up, and then I could definitely hear the motor running again in the unit when it was switched on. But the next step was to just generally have a bit of a look at this, and I rotated things around and got to the gearing here, and I'll just zoom in so that you can see. And this gear here has lost a whole lot of teeth, and so it'll only work part of the way. And we've got metal tooth gear from the motor, and it's quite possible that this gear here has just been chewed away by that metal tooth. It's sort of got brittle, and teeth have fallen off, and then it's gradually got worse and worse and worse. So what I've done, because I've got no idea, well, there's probably no possibility of getting the precise gear that is supposed to go in here, I've just bought a whole swag of Chinese plastic gears, and hopefully we'll find something in the group of about 200 gears that I've purchased to actually fit here. It probably won't have this raised section necessarily on here, and I might have to put a spacer in so that the with the circlip holding things down, the gear won't actually ride up and down. But we're just waiting for that to arrive, and then I can see whether there's anything in that batch that will do the job here. But because of that, it's not getting home, the head is not being homed properly, and it's quite possible that the software is just locking up because it's not finding the head home position. So there is in the manual a section that details removal and replacement of the printer assembly, and actually allowing the operation of the unit without a printer assembly while you're waiting for a replacement from Hewlett-Packard. And that appears to be recommending you place a link wire onto the home position, and that would sort of be fairly logical, that obviously the software is going to wait for the printer to be into the home position before it actually continues on. So I'm guessing that if I temporarily ground the home signal so that it will indicate that the printer is in the home position, then hopefully we should see the rest of the equipment work normally. As per the manual, we've linked the chassis ground and the OOPS signal to each other, and that link will have to come off when we have fixed the printer. Now the next thing is to remove the main drive cable, and in fact what we'll do is we'll take the printer and I/O board out, make it easier, and then get in here and remove this cable. Okay, so we'll take that cable out, and then according to the manual we have to connect the pin 4, which is a ground signal, to pin 20. So pin 4, I believe, is from this end. Just getting in here with my big fat hands is a bit of an issue. So we'll just get that in. Okay, so that's pin 4. And then this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So it's right on the end is a 20-way connector. So plug that in there, and then plug in our board again, and we shall see whether... Okay, we'll switch it on, and we don't appear to have anything happening at all. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, just did a quick check, and this board had popped out of its sockets, so it appears now like we've got the unit running, and I'll just put a reference voltage in and we can check what the inputs are actually doing. Alright, so we've just put 10 volt source onto channel 1, and it appears to be within 1 count, so probably it's a little bit below 1 millivolt out in the display. So that appears to be good, and if we do the same thing for channel 2, so it's going to now switch between, it'll scan between channel 1 and channel 2, and so if I now change this over to 10 volts on here, while channel 1 is open, it's giving me anomalous results. We'll just stick a resistor onto that. This is a 100k ohm, and that's now quite low. That's better. So it looks as though the unit is working. Now that it's getting a correct home signal from the printer, it's happy.